Maeve, this is my first time talking to you on radio. Before we talk about the latest news of what is happening in South Sudan, could you tell our listeners a bit about your professional background, please, and how you decided to end up working in Concern?
Yes, so I initially studied philosophy and politics in Trinity, was my undergrad, and then after that I went into the world of TV and TV production, and I worked as a television researcher. Initially I was freelance, then I worked for RTE, and then about a year ago I made the transition into the kind of humanitarian aid sector, and now I am a content editor with Concern, so I coordinate all of the web content that we write.
And you were abroad with them once last year as well, weren't you?
Yeah, so I went on my first trip with Concern in August of last year, and I went to Niger on a content gathering trip for a fundraising appeal, and I spent just over a week in Niger, and I travelled to the capital, Niamey, and up to the field to where we have our projects.
All right. That's great, yeah. Just to talk about South Sudan, it's been over a year since I covered the country on radio. I've interviewed Sorcha Nick Fahuna from Oxfam a couple of times about it. Sorcha was in South Sudan once, and I interviewed Fiona McCoyle, who was with Docus. I interviewed her once about it once also. Could you just give us an overview in a minute or two, say, of the background to what has happened in the country in the last few years and what's the latest news there? I know, obviously, South Sudan is in the media a lot this week, and that's why we're talking here.
Yeah, so South Sudan is the world's youngest country, and it gained independence in 2011, and that was after a very long and protracted civil war in Sudan, which lasted from 1983 until 2005, and over 1.5 million people died as a result of that very long civil war. So yeah, South Sudan gained independence in 2011, and then in 2013 civil war broke out in the independent state of South Sudan between two warring factions, and then conflict and fighting really has been ongoing since then, 2013, with intermittent breaks and ceasefires, but on the whole it's been kind of persistent since 2013.
Yeah, and the latest news is that, like in the news this week, there's been a famine declared. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a famine was declared officially and formally by the government of South Sudan and by the UN at the beginning of this week. So there is 100,000 people facing starvation, and there is over 1 million people on the brink of famine. So it's a quite a catastrophic food crisis, and we Concern are responding on the ground with emergency nutrition and food distributions. But it would seem that this famine is a result of the kind of protracted violence and crisis that's been ongoing since 2013.
It's a famine in two states, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a famine in Unity State and Bahal al-Ghazar in the north of South Sudan. So it's kind of restricted to the north and central South Sudan.
Are you in Concern working in the country from 2011, since the country was started as a new country, or are you working there beforehand? Earlier, and could you tell us what your colleagues working in the country or who are back in Ireland but have been in the country have to say about life in the country? Like, I remember talking to Sorcha Nick Fahuna from Oxfam, and she was in South Sudan, and she was telling me about the horrendous conditions. This is in 2015, I think, about people living in the refugee camps. Like, have you heard the same stories, kind of like?
Yeah, I have. So Concern has been working in Sudan, the Republic of Sudan, since 1985 in response to the conflict in Darfur, and many of the regions that we worked in are now in the South Sudan, the Republic of South Sudan. So in fact we've been working in Sudan, or the territories of South Sudan, since about 1985, but we kind of established our operations there in 2013, which was in response to the conflict and the humanitarian fallout of the conflict. It's quite kind of catastrophic, really, what's going on in South Sudan at the minute. There's huge internal displacement, almost 2 million people internally displaced, and these people are housed in temporary camps, the protection of civilian camp in unity state in Bentu is housing hundreds of thousands of internally displaced people, and then there's over 1 million refugees who have fled out of South Sudan into neighbouring countries looking for escaping the violence, essentially. So it's a country definitely in massive upheaval, massive instability, and it's kind of it's obvious the reasons of the current famine. People haven't had the opportunity to plant, to harvest, and because they're displaced, they're kind of without livelihoods, without income, and therefore without food.
Is the violence in certain regions in South Sudan, or is it widespread? Like, I understand that South Sudan is a geographically big country, although it doesn't seem like, if I'm looking at most maps on the internet, I believe it's the size of Texas, I heard. Do you know, is the violence throughout the country or in some regions? Or
the violence mostly has been between two kind of main warring factions, and I'm not actually 100% on the specifics of where the violence has been taking place. Our priority as a humanitarian aid organisation is to respond to the humanitarian need, and at the moment that seems to be greatest in the north and central Sudan, South Sudan.
Okay, Maeve, in summary, what would your message be to anyone listening to this interview about how things have to change in South Sudan, and about how people, our listeners, can help bring about change and peace in the country?
Yeah, so as I said, the famine has been declared in 2 states of South Sudan. We must act now to prevent that spreading and to prevent the suffering of millions more people. Ultimately, the cessation of violence is the kind of answer and the way we can stop that. But we are on the ground providing emergency nutrition to children, to families, to mothers, to avoid suffering. So if listeners could support in any way by donating, that would be much appreciated. Our appeal is live on our website, and you can donate there. But if people, by staying informed, I guess, is another way, and putting pressure on maybe local media, local government to kind of be more aware of the issues and try and use their influence in any way to bring more attention to the crisis in South Sudan.
Okay, Maeve, thanks. Is é seo an céadúr dom leabhar chat ar an Raidió an Maeve. Sular leabhraíonn tú faoin nuachtas daoine an Sudan Theas an féidir beag an í fiúd féin insin dún agus faoin gúis ar chin tú teach de gobar le concern.
Dúirt Maedhbh McDonald agus drasal mé ar chlóisna tríóide agus bhíonn mé staidir ar políocht agus Tosaíonn agus iní an staidir sinna dhéanamh thosaigh méid obair mar taideóir telefís d'oibre méid gnáthsblach fear cúpla bliain agus an sin d'oibre mé le RTE ach tám ag obair an seo ag concern le bliain anuas agus is agrthóir digitalach mé agus déanam annach chuid scríomh agus cumarsáid digitalach do concern.
Agus tá tú le concern le bliain anuas agus tú thar learló ó bháin freisin nar achi.
Yeah, drasal mé go dtí Níger an bliain Seachtaine agus cha mé Seachtaine ag leart le daoine atá na chonaí ann ag tógad pictiúr agus ag scríomh scéalta na ngaoine síos.
Okay, chun leabhar tríonóachtas daoine faoin Sudan Theas, leabhar mé le sorcha Nic Fahiúna ó Oxfam Éireann ar Raidió roinnt óra faoi seo bhí sorcha sa Sudan Theas ó bháin freisin, agus leabhar mé le Fiona Coyle a bhíle an agiocht dógus faoi hena féin freisin. A féide acur a thuirt dún faoin bhá a bhfuil an ghircéim seo ar siúl anois, agus faoin nuachtas daoine agus cad faoin bhfuil a dhéanamh ag concern sa tír le a thug.
Sure, so for an Sudan Theas saoirse ó Sudan I go bhíle sa 11 agus béis sin deire le béis sin comhaontú ag deire cogadh Sudan agus bé an cogadh is fuide is dar an Afric a thorla is Sudan agus ri sé ó 1983 gurí 2015 agus maríoch níos mó na milliún duine sa cogadh sin, so tubaiste fósach a bhí ann ach in 2011 for an Súdáin has saoirse agus bunaíodh an stát Súdáin has ach in 2013 briseach cogad caracha eile amach Súdáin has agus bhí trid idir gá fórsaí sa Súdáin has agus ó 2013 gotí aniu tá foréigean agus trid ag tuairliú sa stát.
Agus is é an nuacht is déine an nuacht mhór atá sa man commerceáide an teachn seo ná go gcuirta fógrathe sa tír nach bhfuil?
Tá fógraíoh gcuirta sa tír ag tús an Seachtaine agus fógraíoch é ón rialtas Súdáin has agus ón UN agus deirtear go bhfuil níos mó ná míle duine fábásta an ochras agus níos mó ná milliún duine ar brúch gurta, so is tabáiste olmhór atá ann.
Níl gúirta fógrathe ó thaobh an tír ar fad nach bhfuil tá sé just stát áirithe nach bhfuil?
Fógraíoch an gurta i gástát sa túisgurt don tír Unity State ceann leis an stát agus Bathir al Gaeilge an stát eile agus bíd sin gá stát ina bhfuil concern ag obair.
An bhfuil sibh i concern ag gobar an sa tír ón tús fithe sa haindeag?
Tá concern ag obair i Súdáin ó 1985 nóir bhriseach an tubair amach i Darfur agus bhí mar gobar ag cúpla státe atá inis sa stát an Súdáin a has ach thosaigh mud ag obair go fórmhór sa Súdáin has ag 2013 nóir bhriseach amach an trid agus an cóga caracha agus bhí mar thosaigh mud ag obair san am sin.
An féidir leat just beidir cúpla focail a insin dún faoin méid néan do cód lacathe atá ag obair an sa Súdáin has nó a raibh faoin Scéal sa látá nniuhain. Like, it's cuihann cáint se sorcha nic bheithún ó Oxfam agus bhí sí sa tíre ar bháin agus bhí sé gin sin dom ar Raidió faoin an rochanílacha atá sa gampi tefachán. Tá na scéalte céine cloiste go freisin bhfuil?
Deirtear gur bhfuil cuasaí olc golóir ann. Tá annach chuid daoine dílóirithe go hinmheanach ann níos mó ná deirhin 2 milliún duine agus cuirtar na daoine seo suas i campi protection of civilian camps annach chuid dómh I ben tú rin an UN an protection of civilians camp I ben tú agus tá níos mó an na mílta daoine na chonaí ann. Níl cuasaí roiá don na roioine an ní féidir le oibre ní féidir le a bí éine féine ás agus tá siad tá orthú impi ar an UN agus agrathirí cosú le concern de bí agus mar sin agus ní féidir le bhean absplach a heile tus gur ág siad a cheach agus a ferm agus gachar de bhí arsúla go rih gur bhris an cóga amach.
Agus cuihann nó mé sorcannic bheithún ag rá go bhfuil na campi féin an salach freisin. Just ag an nera a Maedhbh, cén teachtracht atá guibh chuna cór in lí dar éistóirí maidir teagaí na tíre agus faoin slí a déadhríos cearrthóirt libh?
Well, déitoch an Súdáin has teagaí ionintach a bheith aige tá annach chud acuní nádortha ag an tír ach caithí deire a teacht leis an cóga agus an trid seo ilig mar tá an tionchar ar na roioine sa tír ú fásach. Tá muidne concern ag obair I Unity State agus I Bathir al Gaeilge agus tá mud ag tuairt cuthú ag an dála tá mud I dála bí dus na daoine agus tátaíocht ag tastal uine chun an obair sin a chumad agus I dhéanamh agus níos mó daoine chu éigen dá a chuirt den níos mó daine ann. So dá bhéitoch daoine taíocht a chuirtúna tá a píal agan faoi láthair agus tá sé sin le feiceáil ar an sibh a lína tá agan concern.net. Agus just éistecht agus bheith faoin eolas atá cad a torlú sa Súdáin tas, mar caiimid ní féidirlinn caiimid aig go hort ar an ggurta seo agus ní féidirlinn gan aig go hort ar.